What happens when a self-made CEO goes undercover, only to freeze mid-bite during lunch when he hears his team talking about working illegal hours. Elias Anderson had built his chain of 9 fast casual restaurants from the ground up. He started with one tiny location and a grill that barely worked. 15 years later, he had a loyal customer base, hundreds of employees, and a sleek office on the top floor of a downtown building. But lately, something had felt off. The numbers looked fine, but customer satisfaction scores at the 9th location opened just 10 months ago were slipping. Elias had gotten vague reports. Long wait times, employee burnout, inconsistent food quality. The district manager, a guy named Trevor, always blamed growing pains. But Elias had learned a long time ago that when people keep saying growing pains, it usually meant something was being ignored. Elias had never met most of the staff at the new location. It was in a different part of the state, and the hires were all done by local management. The company had grown enough that new hires didn't recognize him anymore, especially after he trimmed his beard, dyed his hair gray, and added a slight limp to his walk. He even wore thick glasses and a faded name tag that said, Gary. He signed up as a new trainee dishwasher for that location. The general manager, a wiry guy named Nick, barely looked up when Elias walked in that Monday morning. Dish pit's back there. Don't screw up, Nick muttered. The moment he stepped into the kitchen, Elias felt the tension. The air was hot, not just from the stoves, but from something deeper. The line cooks didn't talk much. A young woman named Becca, no older than 22, was wiping sweat from her forehead every few minutes while flipping patties with one hand and answering the phone with the other. Where's James? One of the fry guys asked. Still here, Becca said. He's pulling a double again. Third one this week? The guy muttered. Elias kept his head down. He washed dishes, wiped counters, and took mental notes. Nick only came into the kitchen to bark orders. The assistant manager, a woman named Carla, seemed more focused on checking social media than helping the overwhelmed team. By noon, Elias had worked up a sweat. His shoulders ached. He hadn't done this kind of work in years, and it showed. He stepped outside, grabbed a cold sandwich from the fridge, and sat at a small table behind the building near the dumpsters. It was the only quiet place he could find. That's when he heard it. Voices, 2 of them. They didn't see him sitting around the corner. I swear, if Nick makes me clock out and keep working one more time, I'm done, one voice said. It was Becca. You're not the only one, said the other. Sounded like James. He told me if I complained about hours again, I'd find myself on a permanent break. I've worked 74 hours this week already, and I'm not even getting overtime. Elias froze, sandwich in hand. Becca let out a bitter laugh. I'm tired, James. I'm so tired. But I need the job. My mom lost hers last month. There was a pause. He said it's just how restaurants are run. That we're lucky we have jobs. Elias felt sick. Not just from what they said, but because he believed them. And because he knew this wasn't just bad management. This was illegal. He stood up slowly, took a deep breath, and walked back into the kitchen like nothing happened. But inside, something had shifted. That night, he went back to his motel and stared at the ceiling. He thought about his younger self, hungry, broke, and working 2 jobs just to stay afloat. That was who he built the company for. People like Becca, like James. And now, his name was on a building where they were being pushed past their limits and punished for speaking up. Elias didn't sleep that night. He showed up early the next day, ready to keep playing the part of Gary a little longer. But soon he'd stop playing. Elias arrived at the restaurant before dawn, slipping in through the back entrance, while the delivery guy rolled crates of produce through the prep area. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. The kitchen was already humming despite the hour 2 prep cooks chopping vegetables. a teenage barista setting up the coffee station, and the fryers still cooling from the night before. He washed his hands, tied his apron, and headed straight to the dish pit. The floor was sticky from last night's clothes. No one had mopped. When the sun finally cracked through the small window above the sink, Nick came in with a clipboard, walked past Elias without a glance, and started shouting orders to the cooks, none of whom had clocked in yet. "Let's go, people. We've got 2 school buses coming through after breakfast, then the lunch rush. If you're not moving, you're in the way." Becca walked in 5 minutes later, eyes glazed, phone buzzing in her back pocket. Her apron still had yesterday's grease on it. Her hair was pinned up with a pen. Nick pointed at her. "You're doing register and expo. I don't want to hear about it. If Carla's late again, you cover her side too." "I haven't even," she started, but he cut her off. "Not my problem." Elias dried his hands and walked toward the trash bin. Becca's shoulders were slumped, but she didn't argue. She just turned and walked to the front. By mid-morning, the line stretched out the door. Customers waited impatiently, tapping their feet, checking their watches. A middle-aged man in a suit started hollering about the wait time. Becca tried to calm him, but Carla had only just wandered in, coffee in hand, sunglasses still on. "You can take over now," Becca said, voice cracking. "Chill," Carla said, brushing past her. "I just got here." Becca exhaled fast, muttered something under her breath, and disappeared into the back. Elias followed a few steps behind under the guise of taking out trash. He found her crouched by the dry goods shelf, rubbing her knees. "You all right?" he asked. She blinked at him, then wiped her face. "Yeah, just needed a second." He nodded, then walked back to the dish station. His hands shook slightly as he picked up another tray. His ears were still ringing from the chaos up front. Later, during a rare lull, James came in from outside, his uniform soaked through from taking out crates. Elias caught him carefully adjusting a bandage on his wrist behind the prep sink. "What happened?" James didn't meet his eyes. "Nothing, just a burn. Grill flared last night." "You get it looked at?" "I don't have time for that," James muttered. "Besides, Nick would just say it's my fault." Elias watched him walk away, then turned his attention to the walk-in fridge. It smelled off. Not rotten, but close. He stepped inside and saw 3 cases of chicken stacked above the safe temperature zone. One of the boxes was leaking, juices pooling on the floor near a bucket of lettuce. He stepped out and flagged one of the prep cooks, a quiet woman in her 50s named Marla. "This chicken's not being kept cold enough." She didn't look surprised. "The cooler's been acting up for weeks." "Told Nick." "Told Carla. They said just keep the door shut." "That's not safe." "I know," she said softly. "But I need this job." Elias clenched his jaw. He'd built his company on food safety. It was non-negotiable. And here it was, being ignored like a suggestion instead of a law. Just after noon, the school buses arrived. Dozens of kids stormed in with teachers, and the line exploded. Becca was back on register, Carla nowhere in sight. Nick stood by the counter barking orders without lifting a finger. The kitchen was understaffed, the fryer overloaded, and food was taking twice as long as it should. A mother from the group stepped up to the counter mid-meal, holding a tray with undercooked fries and a burger that was pink in the middle. "This is raw," she said, voice sharp. Becca looked at the tray, then at Nick. "I can remake it." Nick didn't even come over. "Tell her it's supposed to be medium." Elias leaned forward from behind the counter. "She said it's raw." Nick's eyes narrowed. "You're a dishwasher, Gary. Go back to your station." The woman was staring now. Becca looked like she wanted to disappear. "I'll get you a new one," Elias said quietly, walking toward the grill. Nick stepped in front of him. "What did I just say?" Elias didn't answer. He turned to Becca. Get her something fresh and comp her order. Nick's voice rose. You don't give orders in my store. The entire room was watching. Elias took a slow breath, then looked Nick in the eye. You're right, he said. But I do. He reached into his back pocket, pulled out his company badge, and set it on the counter. I'm Elias Anderson. I own this company. Gasps rippled through the kitchen. Becca's mouth parted slightly. James turned from the grill like he'd heard someone say his name in a dream. Marla dropped a spoon. Nick stepped back, blinking. You're what? I've been here 3 days, Elias said. I've seen enough. Nick started to talk, but Elias cut him off. You've been endangering employees and customers, forcing people to clock out and keep working, ignoring safety issues, threatening staff. That ends now. Look, some of them exaggerate. Elias didn't raise his voice. You're finished here. You can gather your things and leave immediately. Nick hesitated, then turned and stormed toward the office. Elias turned to the staff. If anyone's been asked to work off the clock, or if you've reported issues that were ignored, I want full details sent to the HR contact posted in the break room. Starting tomorrow, this store gets full regional oversight. And every one of you is getting a sit-down with me or someone I trust. Becca glanced at him, eyes wide. James leaned against the grill, exhaling like he'd been holding his breath for hours. I'm not here to run a company where people get hurt trying to survive, Elias said. That's not who we are. The line of customers was starting to buzz. Carla finally appeared from the back, confused. Elias didn't acknowledge her. He picked up the raw burger and handed it to James. Let's do this right. James nodded and slid a new patty onto the grill. For the first time all day, Elias saw something shift in the kitchen. Not relief, not yet, but something close to it. The work wasn't over, not by a long shot, but it had finally started. Elias returned the next morning before the sun rose. No disguise, no apron. He wore a plain black polo with the company logo stitched small over the heart and jeans that had seen a few boardrooms and plenty of warehouse floors. When he walked through the rear entrance, the prep cook on duty straightened up mid-carrot chop but said nothing. She just gave a small nod and went back to her work. That was enough. Carla arrived 20 minutes after opening. She stopped cold the moment she saw Elias standing near the register, arms folded, watching as Becca quietly handled the breakfast rush with 2 new hires who looked like they'd barely been shown the ropes. Carla hesitated, then forced a thin smile and walked over. Morning. Didn't know you were coming in again. I'm here until this place runs the way it was always meant to, Elias said without looking at her. Where's the roster? I want to see who's on shift today. Carla pulled out her phone, scrolling. We've got Becca, those 2 new girls from yesterday, and Marla's doing prep. James is off. I tried calling someone from the other location to help, but you didn't schedule a full crew the day after a staff shakeup? I didn't know who was staying. Or what your plan was. You're the assistant manager. You don't wait for someone else to hand you a plan. You build one. Carla flinched slightly. Elias turned to Becca. How many hours did you work last week? Becca hesitated. 59. But part of that was training the new hires. Not anymore. You'll get your full hours, but no one clocks more than 40 unless they sign off and get approved. And no more training unless you're paid for it. Becca nodded slowly. Carla opened her mouth, but Elias cut her off. You're on food safety duty today. No phones. No distractions. I want temp logs, sanitation, and back storage audited by lunch. If I find any violations, you're out. She blinked. That's not even my... You're being given a second chance. Don't waste it. Carla walked off toward the back, her face tight. Elias turned his attention to the line, then walked over to the new hires. What's your name? He asked the shorter of the 2. Melanie, you been trained on the register? Sort of. I watched Becca yesterday. All right, you're shadowing me now. He stepped behind the counter and started taking orders, moving with practiced ease. It had been years since he'd rung up a combo meal, but the muscle memory was there. By mid-morning, the line finally thinned. Elias stepped aside, letting Melanie take the next few customers while he watched. Marla appeared from the kitchen holding a clipboard. "Freezer's still holding steady," she said quietly. But the meat delivery came half-thawed. "Who signed for it?" "Carla. Said she didn't have time to send it back." Without a word, Elias walked into the kitchen, found Carla by the mop sink, and held out his hand. "Delivery receipt." She fumbled through her apron and handed over a crumpled page. Elias scanned it, then looked up. "If meat arrives above 40 degrees, you reject it. That's day 1 training. I didn't want to delay prep. Then you delay service. Not safety." He looked over his shoulder. "Marla, pull every box that came on this truck. Toss anything suspect. Log it. We'll file for reimbursement." Carla crossed her arms. "You know we're already short. You want to waste half our inventory. I want to protect the people who eat here. You don't get to cut corners on that." He handed the sheet back and walked out. Carla didn't follow. By noon, James had shown up off shift, not in uniform, just jeans and a hoodie. He leaned against the front wall, watching the floor, eyes scanning every station. Elias stepped over. "You here for something?" James shrugged. "Becca said you were still around. I just wanted to see it with my own eyes." "You're not scheduled." "I know. I'm not clocked in. Just curious." Elias studied him for a moment. "You thinking about coming back full-time?" James didn't answer right away. Then, "Depends. Things really changing." "Depends. You willing to be part of that?" James nodded once. "If people stop getting pushed around, I'm here. Then come in tomorrow. We'll talk about moving you into a lead role. Not management yet, but something that gives you a say." James didn't smile, but he stood straighter. Back inside, Elias pulled Becca aside during a lull. They stepped into the dry storage room, where the hum of the cooler muffled the noise outside. "I want to know if there's anyone else here who's been putting up with more than they should." Becca looked hesitant. "You sure you want to know all of it? I wouldn't ask otherwise." She leaned against the wall. "There's a kid who quit last month. Andre. He was 16. They had him closing alone some nights. Nick told him not to tell anyone. Said it would look bad. Then there was Maya, worked grill for a while. Quit after Carla said something about her hair being too distracting for food service. Maya wears her hair natural." Elias's jaw tightened. "Did anyone report either of those?" "Not officially. People didn't think it would matter. It does now." He stepped out and pulled his phone. Within minutes he had HR on the line. "I need a full review of terminations and resignations from this location in the last 6 months. I want names, exit notes, and whether any discrimination claims were filed or hinted at." He hung up and turned to Marla, who was finishing up the temp logs. "You ever consider running a kitchen?" She looked up, startled. "Me? You're thorough, quiet, but you don't cut corners. That's what I need. I've never managed before. Neither had I when I started. You're training with me the rest of the week." She didn't say anything, but her grip on the clipboard tightened. By late afternoon, Carla stood near the office, her expression unreadable. Elias walked over. "You're being transferred." She blinked. "What?" "You'll report to the regional office for reassignment. You don't step foot in another location until you complete retraining. And if I hear of even one more incident involving biased treatment or safety negligence, you're out permanently. But I've been here since opening. You had authority. You used it poorly. You're not being fired, but this is your last chance. Decide how you want to use it. She swallowed hard, then turned and walked back toward the break room. Elias stepped outside, letting the door swing shut behind him. The alley was quiet, the sky turning gold above the rooftops. He remembered sitting out here as Gary, just days ago, overhearing two employees speak with more honesty than any report had offered in months. He'd built this company to be a shelter, not a trap. Somewhere along the way, the distance between him and the floor had become too wide. That was over now. He'd be back again tomorrow, and the day after that. Not to supervise, but to stay connected. Because the only way to lead was by standing in the place the decisions landed hardest, right at the bottom. The following Monday, Elias arrived just after sunrise with 2 regional trainers and a third-party HR consultant. No press, no cameras, just people who understood that rebuilding a culture didn't happen with speeches, it happened hour by hour, decision by decision. He stepped into the dining area, where the new hires were huddled at a table with notebooks. Becca was reviewing shift checklists with them, her voice low but steady. She paused when she saw Elias, then nodded once and kept going. In the kitchen, Marla stood at the prep station, gloves on, slicing onions with careful precision. She glanced at the temperature log posted above the sink, marked with fresh entries. The walk-in fridge now had a digital thermometer installed, a fix Elias had ordered over the weekend. He stepped beside her. "How's it feel?" She didn't stop slicing. "Controlled. Still fast, but manageable." "You keeping up?" Marla wiped a hand on her apron. "I'm not behind yet. Ask me again after lunch." He nodded and moved on. James was at the grill, this time in uniform, a small laminated badge clipped to his collar that read, Team Lead Training. He was reviewing the order board with Melanie, walking her through time targets and plating standards. Elias waited until the next lull before speaking with him. "You settling into the new role?" James leaned against the prep table. "I'm learning where everything is, and how many shortcuts we were taking before. You handling it? I'm not trying to be a hero. Just trying to do it right. You'll get there." A delivery truck pulled up outside. This time, the driver waited while Becca scanned the invoice with a thermometer in hand. She flagged one box called Elias over and pointed out that the fish was barely within the safe margin. "We can't hold this more than a day," she said. "You want me to reject it?" He looked at the box, then back at her. "What would you do if I wasn't here?" "I'd send it back." "Then do it." She signed the rejection slip and handed it back to the driver, who didn't argue. Elias watched her walk back inside without needing instructions. By noon, the store was busy but calm. Orders were moving. The fry station was staffed by a new hire from a nearby location who'd volunteered to help after hearing what had happened. The energy had shifted, not relaxed, but focused. Staff moved quickly, but no one looked cornered. After the rush, Elias gathered everyone in the dining area. Some leaned against counters. Others pulled up chairs. Carla was absent. She had reported to the regional office that morning for retraining. Elias stood in front of them, no clipboard, no notes. "I came here to see what was going wrong. I thought it would take me a few hours. It took me one bite of a sandwich." There were a few quiet laughs. "You've all been carrying more than anyone should. Some of you were asked to break laws. Others were made to feel like you didn't have a voice. That ends with us. But you need to know exactly what's changing." He nodded toward the trainer standing nearby. "Starting tomorrow, every employee here gets mandatory paid compliance training, labor rights, food safety, and how to document concerns. We're also installing a new reporting system that goes to senior HR directly. No more bottlenecks through middle managers." He pointed to the back hall. "That office is being audited. Every schedule, every payroll log, every exit interview. If someone was wronged, we're going to fix it. The room was quiet. Marla's stepping in as interim kitchen lead. James is training up as floor lead. Becca, we're putting you in a mentorship program with our operations director. You've carried more weight than anyone should have to. You've earned the chance to grow. Becca stared at the floor for a second, then looked up. I'm not used to being noticed. You were never invisible. You were just surrounded by people who didn't look. He paused. We're not hiring a new general manager yet. This team needs time to rebuild trust. And I need time to watch how things run without someone trying to cover up problems. Someone in the back raised a hand. It was Melanie. What happens when you leave again? Elias didn't hesitate. I've already changed my schedule. Every week, I'll be working in one of our stores not as a guest, not as an observer. As staff. That's how I built this place. That's how I'm going to keep it right. No applause. Just silence, the kind that meant people were processing something real. After the meeting, Elias stepped outside, letting the door shut behind him. The breeze had picked up. The alley smelled of fryer oil and cardboard, but the air felt different. He sat on the same crate he'd eaten his sandwich on a week earlier. Becca stepped out a few minutes later. She didn't say anything at first, just leaned against the wall. My mom got a call from her old job, she said. They're rehiring her. Said they heard what happened here and figured maybe they needed to reevaluate how they treat people too. Elias looked over. Good. That's how it starts. She crossed her arms. I don't know if I'll stay here forever, but I want to see what this place looks like when it's run the way you say it should be. That's all I ask. They sat in silence, listening to the hum of the vent fans above. Inside, the kitchen kept moving, orders being called, timers buzzing, footsteps on the tile. Not perfect, but honest. And out back, the man who'd once owned 9 restaurants from a distance sat shoulder to shoulder with one of the people who'd kept it running when no one else was watching. Not as a boss, as someone finally doing the work of leading.